Dorothy Savarese, the president and CEO of Cape Cod 5, who recently traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with our president, Donald Trump. So, Dorothy, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about what did you feel like when you got the call? How did you know that you were going to be one of just 11 CEOs of community banks across the nation to meet with our new president?
Well, as you know, Sarah, in my role as chairman of the American Bankers Association, I'm frequently called on to represent community banks and banking in general in a variety of settings. It was unusual to be asked to participate in a meeting at the White House, and it was an opportunity for us to make the case for community banks. So on that level, it was very exciting.
Absolutely, and I think it's important. I think especially if we're talking about the national level, much attention is paid to the kind of larger banks, the corporate banks. So seeing that that our president does want to pay attention to our smaller community banks is certainly important. And I understand that he is looking at changing some regulations. So what input was he looking for from you and your colleagues?
That's a great question. We were very happy to see that the president and his administration, as so many legislators understand, that well-meaning regulation was crafted that has had good effects, and yet some pieces of it are not designed to be tailored for smaller institutions and have actually had an unintended consequence of inhibiting our ability to meet local needs. So he was looking for the specifics of what obstacles were standing in the way of us lending to small businesses, making mortgages, and meeting community needs. And so he asked very specific questions about each of our economies and the type of businesses that operated there, and what obstacles were presented, and then what would be a solution to that. And his staff was very engaged in that questioning.
Sure. So what are some of the challenges that we are facing here on Cape Cod, and what kind of an impact do those federal regulations, or at least the ones that are in place now, have on banking here on Cape?
Well, we know what a unique region Cape and Islands and southeastern Massachusetts are. Our economies are really like no other in the country, and it's what makes it such a special and wonderful place to live. We have a significant reliance on tourism, and that makes a lot of our business very seasonal in nature. Now, a lot of the rules that were written for lending to people to buy a home, let's say I'm a small business person, I want to buy a home. If I get W-2 income from a big company, it's very easy for me to apply for a loan under the new rules. If I'm a small business owner with very variable income, it's a lot more difficult for you to qualify as one of those qualified mortgages. Now, it doesn't mean banks can't do it. In some cases, they actually can't justify it. But in other cases, you may have to pay more, or the bank could expose itself to liability for making the loan.
And of course, we have a lot of small businesses here on Cape Cod as well, and I'm sure that certainly those come with their own special set of challenges, especially in our seasonal economy.
Precisely. You know, we could get a rainy summer, and you would look and see no cash flow on this business. But we've been lending to this business and their family for generations, and we know that they're very prudent and they have enough set aside to last them through till the next season. And so we have local knowledge that allows us to be very flexible. A lot of the rules put us into boxes that don't allow that flexibility.
Great. So I have to ask, our president is a big public figure, obviously have seen him a lot on TV, have heard a lot on the news. What was it like to actually meet our president?
Well, just like when I met you for the first time, and you're somebody I heard on the radio, you know, it's always a moment when you see somebody that you've seen in other settings and you meet them in person. So there certainly is some recognition of, oh gosh, I'm meeting a public figure. I think the more overarching feeling about the event was the sense of history of being in the Roosevelt Room, the sense of history of then being in the Oval Office, and understanding that you are meeting, our goal is to engage with everybody and advocate for community banks. So we're meeting with an important piece of that, both the president and the Secretary Mnuchin, as well as Director Gary Cohn, who are part of the executive piece of tailoring regulations for community banks, just as we've engaged with our congressional delegation. And, we've seen them all on television, and it's always an experience when you see Elizabeth Warren or Bill Keating in person. So, it's that same sort of, gosh, I've seen you on TV a lot, and now I'm sitting next to you. That's an unusual experience.
Sure, and interacting as well. So
yes.
Did you find him to be engaging and truly connecting with the needs that you and your colleagues were there to talk about?
My colleagues and I were actually, again, very, very gratified that he began with a prepared statement that underscored the criticality of community banks. He talked about how we do nearly half of all small business lending in the country. And so when you start a meeting where somebody already says, yes, we understand community banks are important, gosh, that's going pretty well. So that was good. What was also great, though, was when the press left and the doors closed and you thought, okay, what kind of a meeting will it be now? The interaction was very intense. He kept asking each banker questions, and then he would ask Secretary Mnuchin and Director Cohn questions like, does this take an executive order? Is this something that we need to work with the regulators on? Is this something that we should engage with the legislature on? And so in each case, he would hear an issue, he would hear a potential solution, and then he would circle back to the staff about an answer.
Certainly, and looking at the process as well, because I think that for any elected official, learning the process, or even when you start a new job, learning how to get things done and the processes that need be. So that's encouraging to see, the questions about that process.
Yes, yeah, and the fact that the staff was so prepared with answers and had already studied a lot of the obstacles and were prepared to come up with solutions.
So what are the takeaways? What are next steps following this meeting in Washington?
Well, a lot of that's in the hands of the administration.
Of course.
And so, we'll hear from them. We will continue advocating. I'll be going actually to Washington, D.C. again tomorrow. We have our annual Government Relations Summit. And the point there is to bring representatives of banks, we'll have over 1,200 of them from all over the country, to then meet with their legislatures and their legislators, both congressmen as well as senators, and explain to them how we could collaborate on a bipartisan basis to get some of the tailoring that might be in order. And also, I and my colleagues will be meeting with regulatory heads. There was an executive order that was signed asking the regulators to look at each of their regulations and see how they would potentially impact in a positive or negative way our small businesses and our economy. And so we'd like to discuss with them some things that they could undertake on their own today.
Of course. And are there any changes you'd like to see made right away that could make things a little easier for local community banks? I mean, how is the climate right now for someone like yourself, for a bank like Cape Cod 5, and for our economy here in Cape Cod?
Well, we've had a really good year. In fact, we had a record-breaking year last year at Cape Cod 5, and it was exciting to see so many of our customers do so well, and a lot of people getting that dream of the first home or the second home, and small businesses expanding. We're always cautiously optimistic, obviously, as we're going into a time of a little bit of uncertainty about interest rates and other elements in the economy, the tax code. We want to work very closely with our customers to help them, guide them through all of that. So the economy's been very good and very, very strong. The housing market's been very strong. But again, external forces can always have an impact on that. So we'll be watching that closely. In terms of a recognition of the importance of community banks, the wonderful thing there is that our legislative delegation has been very supportive of community banks and has been articulate about stating their importance. So for us as community bankers, it's been very exciting to see the legislative branch being articulating its support, now the executive branch stating its support, and we work closely with the regulators as part of the executive branch relative to how we can continue to enhance regulations in a way that allows us to meet local needs. Tailoring and allowing smaller institutions more flexibility is really what we're looking for.
Sure. So what's the secret? Cape Cod 5 has been around for so long. It's one of the last remaining community banks that we have here on Cape Cod. I think through the years we've seen places like CCB&T, like Bank of Boston, really kind of get swallowed up into larger conglomerates. So how has Cape Cod 5 managed to stay a community bank in a climate where we're looking at all these corporate takeovers?
Well, the first thing is we are a mutual community bank, and we're passionate about that. We feel that it's part of our DNA. And so what that means is we can't be bought, but we also won't be sold. So in other words, we could make the decision to go public. We choose not to, because we think that our sort of quasi-philanthropic structure allows us to serve the local needs on the Cape and Islands and southeastern Massachusetts most effectively. But in terms of our success, I really attribute it all to our people. I was a customer before I became an employee of Cape Cod 5. 25 years ago, I was a customer, and I was so impressed by the passion that everybody who works for the bank has for our customers and for our communities. And that passion just grows and grows every year. And we know it has to be combined with the latest in technology, with exquisite execution. If you want to close on a house, we need to do it, and we need to do it better than anybody else. So we're all very passionate about that as well. And we're very careful about who we hire. You have to have that same commitment to giving objective advice. If we're not the right bank for you, we'll tell you, and we'll help you find another one. And if it's not the right time for you to buy that home, we'll tell you that as well. We're honest to a fault, but that served us very well.
Of course.
So we're very serious about what we do. We work really, really hard, but it is all about our people, our board, our employees, and our corporators, that we're all on the same page. We say we're one bank, and what we want to do is serve our customers working together.
And did you find that the colleagues that you met with in Washington shared that kind of passion for community banking? I feel like that's almost essential to be able to hold on to something so local as to have a passion for it.
Yes, that's a great observation. We handpicked the colleagues that would come and attend this meeting, and they were all people who were passionate about serving local communities. One of my colleagues from Nebraska is somebody who used as an example the fact that, and we used to be able to do this too, she has a contractor that's a customer, and he could call her up on Friday night and say, I'm going to an auction tomorrow, I'm gonna buy a backhoe, can we just do the paperwork on Monday? Can you advance me the money? No problem. Well, we can't do anything like that anymore, but they could explain how their local knowledge really helped them serve customers. And every one of my colleagues that was there are the same kind of institution we are, which is, Cape Cod 5 gives away, between the bank and our foundation, over $1 million a year, which is disproportionately large for our size, that everybody in the bank is involved in volunteerism. They're the same kind of bankers. They're so passionate about what we do.
Wonderful. Well, Dorothy, I thank you so much for coming in and talking with me, and we'll have to stay up to date as to what's going on in Washington and how that applies to us here on Cape Cod and our economy and our banking preferences.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Been talking today with Dorothy Savarese, the CEO and President of Cape Cod 5. I'm Sarah Colvin.